On this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, we're talking with Dr. Brenda Rante, also known as the Dancing Queen. Stay tuned. All right. So, Brenda,
yes,
we want to know all about you. So, we're going to start with your early age. Your dependency stage, basically, is what we call that. And we want to know everything about your young adult or a young adolescent stage. That's what we're talking about.
You didn't use the pitch thing.
I was just about to say it. So, Omar likes to call this stage the pitch, which I think is, every time I think about it, I think of baseball being pitched. He calls it being pitched into the world. So we want to know about your birth. We want to know about where you were born, where you lived.
Was it a C-section? Was it natural? Was it underwater? No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Okay.
I could edit this out.
Okay. Don't. It was fun. So then, so we want to know about your early years. Where were you born? What's your culture, your family? Tell us about all that.
So interesting. I was born in New York.
New York.
Parents were
Well, where in New York?
Manhattan, New York City.
New York City. All right, New York City.
Okay, that's right. When you say New York, it could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere,
The Big Apple.
The Big Apple.
The Big Apple.
Okay. Yes.
Right. So both my parents were born somewhere else, but met in New York City. So father came from the Philippines and my mother from Jamaica, West Indies.
Well,
but they came when they were like in their 20s, very young. But they didn't meet each other in their 20s.
Oh.
So my mom was married earlier. I don't think my father was ever married until he met my mother.
Okay.
But my mother was married prior. And her husband was Puerto Rican. She had 2 children with that marriage. And she had a rough life because he was abusive. Drugs, I think, led him to that down that road. Somewhere down the road, she meets my dad.
While she's married to, okay.
But I mean, since she was the abused wife or abused wife, my father befriended her and kind of helped her out, looked out for her. And when I hear the stories that she told, it was like, he would steal any kind of money that they had and to buy the drugs. So the kids the 2 daughters that she had never, it was like they needed to eat, and stealing the money, that whole scenario. So fast forward, she meets my dad. The husband ends up dying from an overdose.
Oh, wow.
So my dad is like the knight in shining armor. But at this point then, they're together, and I guess they have me.
You guess.
I guess.
Here you are.
But here's the difference. My mom had me when she was 40, and my father was 55.
Wow.
So so I'm born of older parents,
right?
And then I had stepsisters,
right?
And where were your stepsisters at this stage? Because when you're just a baby, when you were born, your mom is 40. I'm assuming they're more older, in their 20s or so.
No, they were young too. Because there's a 7-year difference between one sister and the other sister. That's like one of those family things I wasn't sure. But one sister ended up living with the ex-husband's sister. So they took her from my mother.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of a story. I don't know a lot about that. But one sister ended up staying, and I always thought of her as my sister. Like none of that stepsister stuff.
Yeah.
So when they have me, I don't even remember a lot. I remember, though, maybe at 4 or 5, that I'm in these pictures at a wedding in church. And I'm like, I'm kind of confused. I'm like, okay, these 2 people are up there doing something. And so it was early. They got married after.
Right. And you were like, maybe they're a flower girl?
No, I was hanging.
Okay.
And only because I see the pictures, our family pictures.
Right.
And I think, so you start to question. But at a young age, I was kind of like, didn't get it.
Yeah.
Until I get to school.
Right.
And then they put us in Catholic school. And so, Catholic school at that point was very strict. Not like it is today. And then you find out about marriage and like, oh, it's a sin not to be married. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh,
yeah,
I think I went to a marriage.
Yeah.
But, so they had me when I wasn't, so all of these stories, because you hear kids talking and.
How old were you when you started?
When I started school, probably 6, 5,
so you
5,
were
6.
pretty.
I was, very questioning everything.
Questioning
questioning.
everything, yeah.
And in Catholic school, you really couldn't question.
No, you're going to question anything.
Like, who was this Adam and Eve?
But you were you
So-
were inquisitive about what was
Yes.
happening, and you knew something wasn't right.
Right.
There.
But,
Okay.
I figured it out later on in life. Like, all of it starts to make sense as you grow older.
Yeah.
So they have me, and I go to school and everything else. So the other part in school is now I'm part of a older parents, right? Because mom is 40 by now. I mean, she's now 45 or 46. Dad is kind of in his 60s at this point.
Yeah.
So in school, then I am like, okay, all my friends' parents are like younger than my parents, and their grandparents are my parents' age.
Right.
So that was one thing I kind of had to get over.
So when you were going through that, when you seeing your friends' parents are much younger, how is this making you feel? I know that you're questioning and you're looking at these things. Like, how is this making you feel inside? Like, what arises?
I don't think I realized a lot. Like I said, a lot of things come together later. But I mean, they were my parents, and I didn't think of it until later that I figured that out. But the one thing that caught me in school, and this is where my identity starts to get a little bit like, who am I? Was I'm born of these two parents, and that's why I joke around and call myself a Jamaican. And that's kind of stuck.
I like that. I like
It
that. I
has
like that.
definitely stuck.
I like that. I'm gonna use that. A Jamaican.
Right, because I'm part of two parents.
Right.
I don't feel like I have to choose one over the other. But when, I think I make reference to like when you had to fill out applications or when you were taking tests and you had to fill out your name and everything. And back in those days, you'd fill out a portion that would ask you your race.
Yes.
Right? And it would always be like, some of them at that point would say Negro, Caucasian. And maybe, I didn't even know if it said Hispanic.
No.
But I was like, those are not a lot of choices. And I said, well, I'm not that and I'm not that. And there was not an other. So I never would answer them.
Right.
What was the consequence of that? You're not answering those questions.
They would probably check the box for you.
Yeah.
And depending on what they thought you were, which I don't think they ever could figure me out because I couldn't fit, but it was one of those things where you're like, I don't fit into the box.
Yeah.
Because even if they tried to assume what you were, like when I first met you, I thought that you were, I wasn't sure. And I think I probably did ask you, but I assumed that you were Hispanic.
Right. Which is what I got as I got older.
Okay.
That's what most people.
Especially because Ben, we'll talk about Ben later, but like just you looked and then you would talk about salsa and Spanish
most
food.
of my friends in New York were Spanish.
Yeah. So, and you had a lot of things that were related to that. Yeah. So anyway.
And then my sister didn't look anything like me. She looked like my mother, and my mother's Jamaican, but my mother's white.
Okay.
A white Jamaican, and people don't think that exists. So my sister looked like my mother, and her father was Puerto Rican. He was light skinned. So she had the light skin, and then here I was, spitting image of my dad. And I went through a stage where I thought I was adopted because I was like, I don't look like her, and so I can't be yours.
Yeah.
And so, and I really seriously thought I was adopted, and my parents told me they found me on the stoop. They would mess with me. And like,
so they said that to you, but
they were joking.
They were joking, but they always assured you. Was there any time in that time frame in which they made you feel like you were not a part of their lives, that you were?
No, it was. No, I knew that I was loved.
Okay.
And I never felt separated like that. That was a stepsister.
Okay.
I mean, I felt like I was the outcast. But she was always like a sister, and so
they didn't treat her differently than you or anything.
No, we both got everything equal. One wasn't. I didn't see that he favored her over me or I was favored over her. It wasn't like, and we had that traditional family where we don't do the things we used to do, like sit down at dinner. I mean, you had to sit down at dinner.
Tell us about that. Tell us about like the family structure in terms of how the household was. On a daily basis, you got up from school. Did your parents go to work, or did they take you to school? And then when you came back to from school, what was that like?
So back then it was mom stayed home and raised the children, and dad was the hard worker.
Now, may I ask one question? What what decade are we talking about? Just for
gonna
people.
make
I'm
me
sorry.
See,
I don't
listen,
want to go
with
there.
all due respect, I did not go there.
I don't want to
right?
be disrespectful,
I
but
did
I
not
think,
go there.
I think New York City is a very different time. And so, understanding that women are not working at
I'm
this point.
respectful of the ladies' age. Doesn't want to date anybody, you know. I mean,
but I think
I'm pretty traditional like that.
Brenda knows how I feel about her age. I've told her many times, but I think it's relevant.
It's relevant,
yeah, because I feel like it's a
different.
different culture in that time, you know, and that's what I'm trying to get at.
I was born in 1959. So during my school years, you'd say I was in the 60s and high school in the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. So what was New York City like then? Like
in the 60s, like
that's what I'm trying to get at is what was that time period like in that city? You know, your mom was able to stay home, your dad made the living and whatnot.
Well, you know, interesting enough, I don't think that I felt the racism. And I'm sure there was because they were two totally different people. They were like a blended family.
Yeah.
They were a biracial couple.
Yeah.
Which
definitely
there were issues there, but I didn't see it.
Okay.
You know, I think they kept us so busy and protected that if they were going through anything, it was never something that we were exposed to.
Right.
You know, school. I went to Catholic school, so that just says it all.
Yeah. Now, were you able? Did you experience any? So going back to my original question. So a day in the life. So your mom stood home. You went to school. Dad went to work. So take us through that.
So it was very traditional. I mean, they were both not born rich.
Okay.
I think some of the qualities that have been instilled in me come from probably dad and mom. That you work hard. You know, your name is you honor your name because that's who you are. But I mean, dad would get up early in the morning. Work. He was a chef, so he would get up early and he'd come home like in early evening. Mom was to stay at home, and I went to school and came home. Mom and dad didn't have a high school education, so education to them was always important. Their main thing was you have to go to school. You know, you have to finish school.
Right.
And so
did they ever place any they instilled that, but did they ever place any pressures on talking to you about like college or anything like that?
No.
Or was it just we want you to finish high school?
Just graduate high school.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious.
But yeah, and because I think that's because they didn't go that far.
Okay.
So then I'm like the first college graduate in this generation. I was the first generation graduate.
Yeah. Okay. So traditionally you had Sunday dinners.
Oh yeah, so going back to that. Yeah. So definitely the ritual was we'd sit down for dinner and
every night.
He liked his rice. Filipinos eat rice. And he was, and they both cooked.
Right.
But I mean, he was very about sitting at the table and having dinner, and we didn't have the phones, and I mean that would have never happened. But yeah, so we sat down, and we talk about stuff, the things that we don't do anymore.
Yeah.
Because I can't even do that with Ben because he's on the phone.
Yeah.
I can text him at the table. Maybe I'll get an answer.
Pass the salt, please.
Yeah, you'll be able to connect with him more often like that.
And then holidays were very traditional.
Okay.
So Thanksgiving was always that was Dad's day to cook. So his big days were Thanksgiving and Christmas. He always made the turkey.
That's got to be an interesting combination, right? Because you have the Philippines, and he's a chef, and then you have the Jamaican tradition. So food-wise, I'm just always interested in food. That's kind of like what I'm hitting at. What was that mixture like?
So Mom would make like some of the traditional Jamaican food, like the oxtail and all that stuff.
You had Omar at that already.
Now I was not a big fan.
No,
right? And so like she would make like stews, and so she'd have the oxtail, she'd put the dumplings in there, all this stuff. By the time I got it, I would take out all the dumplings, and so what was left, everybody was like, where's the rest of it? Because I wouldn't eat. I was like,
so you would take out the oxtail and the dumpling. Oh man.
Yeah, so she would, eat a lot. She'd make all of that, and Dad was more the.
Brenda's also the type that will pick out raisins from the banana bread.
I will separate stuff.
Sorry, I was just putting that on.
But I was a picky eater when I was younger too. Given the parents that I had, I'm surprised.
Yeah. So what did your dad make? He
would make He would make some Filipino dishes. Like he would like lots of meats and rice. We had rice with everything.
He will make the lechon during the pig, the whole pig.
No, he wouldn't do that because we lived in an apartment, or we would burn down the apartment. But he would. They would call it like an adobe. That would be pork or the chicken.
Oh wow!
And he was a good cook.
I'll bet.
I liked my dad's cooking better than my mother's cooking.
Tell her that.
But I had both traditional. But I didn't, pig's feet, oxtail, just
everything.
But he obviously enjoyed her food, and she
so
enjoyed his.
A
good mix, yeah. Wow, that's a lot of culture there, right there. That
I was
been
like,
delicious.
you would think I would have been 500 pounds as a child, but I was skinny.
What about your extracurricular time? So you went to school. I mean, there's a lot of activities in Catholic school. I'm assuming. No,
I was like, where?
How were the nuns back then? Tell us about the nuns in school.
I transitioned from the old nuns, with the black, heavy black. So every time I go into the grocery stores and the blue bonnet butter,
yes.
I always have a flashback.
Oh,
because that's the nun I remember with that
bonnet
thing and the big crucifix.
Yeah, and the ruler.
Right, so I transitioned when I went to grammar school. That's how they were dressing, and then as I got into like the higher grades, like maybe 6, 7, they started to transition into the half habit, and then they were wearing like a suit dress kind of thing below the knee.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to high school, they were dressing like lay people. They weren't, they were looking
they were
normal.
So how was your how was your schooling during those elementary years? Was school something that you really, really enjoyed, or did you also have those conflicts when it came to questioning what you saw around you?
No, well, so my sister was a couple of grades ahead of me.
Okay.
So everybody knew her.
Oh, okay.
And so you always got you're going to be just like your sister. You're going to be smart just like your sister. And so the expectation was I was following in her footsteps. So it was more like you're going to be like her. You're going to be smart. I mean, and I did. I kept up, but I was like, the pressure was on.
Yeah.
And our parents were like, it wouldn't be like, they didn't monitor what I was doing back in the day, like in terms of was I doing my homework or not. We did it. So we kind of were easy for them. Not like today, where I'm like, Ben, are you doing anything in there? Are you breathing? So they weren't on top of us. I think because our grades showed that we must have been doing something because we were getting good grades.
Well, the nuns will have you.
Right.
Other that.
So yeah, and then high school was a little different.
Okay.
Because I went to an all girls school.
How was that?
By this time,
stressful.
We'll go into that. But by this time, were you still living in Manhattan, or have you moved to a different borough?
Lived in that apartment for a long time.
And whereabouts? Because there's Manhattan is it's a large place. Like now you have Washington Heights, you have Harlem, you have East Side. Yeah. So
I was on. Okay, so right now, if you go to New York, the Upper West Side is like the place. Before, when I was living there, it was the Upper East Side that was the place. But it was like I was on 93rd Street between West End and Riverside.
Okay. And how was growing up in that time? Because there was a lot of things happening in New York City during that time frame. You're talking about the 60s, 70s. There's an explosion of culture. An explosion of a fusion of different things happening in the city during that time. How did that influence you as a young child growing in there?
Okay, so my mom was really well known around the neighborhood. Everybody knew her. Okay, so her name was Lucille, and they called her Lucy.
Okay,
and you didn't mess with Lucy's children. But that was the whole neighborhood. All of the children were Lucy's children. Okay. So I have to have funny stories with her because she was protective of the kids. But she knew everybody. And then during those days around the neighborhood, you had gangs, but not like the gangs you have now. No. You had like adult gangs. Like you had the Spanish gangs, you had the Haitian gangs, but they were, they did their thing, but they also protected the neighborhood. And they weren't out to like do just bad things just to do bad things. Totally different.
There was a code.
Yeah, there was a code. Exactly. Yeah. There was a code that you followed, and didn't hurt anybody in your neighborhood. And then you had the cop on the beat. There was not a cop you had the patrol cars, but you actually had a cop walking the beat. So, she knew everybody. When I say she knew everybody, she knew everybody. But I remember one day we were all playing outside, and we went to the park, and there was this man in a car, and he was doing something he shouldn't be doing and trying to call the kids. And my mother got wind of that, and she grabbed one of the kids' baseball bats, a plastic bat, and she chased that man all the way down the hill
with a plastic bat.
And I'm like, Mom, he never came back.
He sure did. He said, I'm not messing with that lady.
No. But that was the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And for our entertainment, there wasn't like you could just go to the beach. It was like a train ride, an hour here to go to the beach.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we're now where we can just go on the car. It's great. But so back in those days, you'd have the fire hydrant.
Yeah.
Tell us about that summer because unless you lived in New York during the summer and the hydrants.
That's a great summer, huh?
Tell us
it
that.
Would get hot. So some of the neighborhood adults would go get the wrench and open up the hydrant, and then all this water would go blasting out, and the kids would take a can and scrape it on the concrete until you made 2 holes so that you could put it on and then play with the water. That was my entertainment.
So in essence, during that time, the neighborhood was safe. You felt safe in the neighborhood. There was a community aspect to it in which the kids and for that matter, everyone was being looked at. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and my neighborhood was very diverse.
Okay,
we had a little bit of everything, and I think that's why nothing was strange, and you never felt like you didn't belong because we were a very blended neighborhood.
Yeah. During this time, and we're talking primarily, in your childhood, besides your parents and your sister, was there any particular person that made a big impact in your life?
I would say, I started working early at 15. And that was I got a job out of high school. It was one of my teacher's husbands who was an attorney. And they just wanted somebody who would type and answer the phones. So, in those days you took a typing class and all that. So I got a job with that firm. And then he ended up taking me under his wing and taught me a lot of things.
Wow.
Before I knew it, I was answering some of the legal forms for him. So he taught me a lot of things.
So you were like a paralegal?
Oh, yeah, right. At 15.
That's pretty good.
Now, how much money were you making back then?
I can't remember. I don't even know I know it wasn't what the rate is now.
No.
Wow.
But everything else was less too. So even if I was making $2, that was, tokens were like 10 cents.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
It fit the time period.
So you got a job, you're working, you're going to school. How was the transition from middle school into high school? You mentioned earlier that you went to an all-girls high school.
Right. And in
how was
Catholic
that?
school, in the earlier days, they split you boys and girls too. And then somewhere in the middle, then they blended us. And then I go to high school, and then I'm back to all girls. It was interesting, but it just so happens that was the school I went to, because there were blended schools.
Okay.
But at 3:00, all the boys would be lined up downstairs, and it would be like, ooh, that one's cute. That one's cute. So that was the highlight at 3. Everybody lived for 3:00. Because then you could see who was outside and whose boyfriend was who. And then whose boyfriend brought their friend to introduce you to
her friend.
Her friend.
That's hilarious.
So that was the gossip part. Is like, ooh.
And we all wore uniforms, so we all had the same uniform.
Yeah.
You couldn't really do too much with the uniform.
Yeah. Wow,
that's interesting. So what was that like? Did you have like any good girlfriends, best friends?
Yeah, well, and see, during that time too, then I think that we were hitting the 70s, and so the disco time came out. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Yeah, I love the disco
and
era.
I was like little dancing queen. I was a disco queen. So that was more a fun stage. That's why the dancing comes in.
I was just gonna say that this is where your dancing thing comes from. You love all that stuff.
I did.
So this is interesting because now you're just taking us into like the next stage where we go to the self-reliance stage, which is that age or that stage where you're going from adolescence into like your more adult stage,
young adult,
mature stage.
Yeah.
So for me, the disco era was my rebel stage.
Were you?
And yeah, let's talk about that.
Tell us that. Yeah, I want to hear that.
So
It's actually not that great.
So you're in high school. You're working. When did the disco stage come in? Were you still in high school when this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because my sister was older, so she went to a club one night, and I went with her.
Oh.
So I had to dress up.
So you got to go to the club? How old were you?
I was like 16.
Ooh, going to the club.
Had me a fake ID, and I
Really?
thought, oh yeah.
How did you guys get a fake
Oh
ID?
my gosh.
I took my high school ID, and good Lord, I don't even.
Remember the old
like
IDs used to be you could just tear them apart, stick something else in there, and then close
And
it back
it
up.
wasn't even like that. It was like like the file folder labels, just typed
Really?
up a thing, and they took it. I know that they knew I was young.
You had access to the typing machine, so you just did it there.
But,
Okay.
I mean, back in the day, it was like, wow.
That's hilarious.
Because I didn't have a driver's license yet.
Right.
Because there was no need for me to drive because we had major transportation.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the beauty of New York City.
Yeah.
How was it going to the clubs and stuff for you? Was it like, were you like boy crazy, or were you just like?
No, I think, because during that stage, that whole hustle thing came out, and that was like the big craze, and that was the time. I mean, everybody that was the big dance, and so I really got into that.
Oh, okay.
And
so you were more into dancing,
and then
just,
there was a lot of like professional dancers, and then a lot of contests.
Okay,
and I got into a lot of contests.
So how did you learn? Was it just something that was innate with you? Did you take classes?
No, I didn't take any.
Yeah, it was it just
got on the floor, and it was like part of that Jamaican and Filipino came out in me, and I was like,
yeah, because she didn't have YouTube, so she couldn't YouTube the hustle or anything like that. You just learned.
Like some people paid to go to the dance studio to learn hustle, and I just went to the clubs and said.
So your very first time you get in with a fake ID, your sister's there with you. What does she tell you, and what do you do?
Oh well, because like now it's nighttime, and you get to stay out late.
Yeah.
And then it was just the whole scene.
Now wait a minute. What about your parents? They didn't know you went to the club.
I was going out with my sister,
so they were okay.
They trusted her. Okay.
And your sister and you did not tell them you were going to the club. You just went out.
We're going to a party.
We're going to a party.
Okay.
Down the block.
Okay. All right.
I mean, and I didn't drink.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't drink.
So tell us about you go in. You what did your sister tell you?
Oh, nothing. She was like, because we both were learning the hustle at that same time. So she was kind of,
But did she say things like, okay, you need to stick with me, watch out for these guys?
I did. I stuck with her anyway because I was like, I don't know who these people are.
Okay. All right.
But we had friends too that we had known.
Okay.
Mutual friends. Okay.
And then so you get in there, you start dancing, and then it just, okay, I got to do this every weekend?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We could do this every weekend.
That's right. So and then fast forward, it became my sister then stopped going, and then I got older.
Okay.
And then I could go, and then I had my group of friends, and we were hanging out, and then that just until the disco died.
So you were
was out
clubbing.
There. Oh.
So
yes.
Jesse tells me that
I would take a nap now if I had to go anyplace.
Okay. I know.
Jesse tells me that you were in competitions and you did all kinds of different. How did you get into that?
Mm-hmm.
It was just that era.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the era. And and the era that, you had people there was dance contests at the clubs.
Did you win?
I won some.
Really?
There was one that was like a real big one called the Harvest Moon Ball.
Oh.
And they did that out of Roseland, and then the finals were in Madison Square Garden.
Oh. Wow.
So I made it to the finals.
What?
You
I didn't win, though.
Wait a minute.
Hey,
wait a minute.
that's a big deal.
You actually went into a competition in Madison Square Garden, right?
Who knew?
That's the mecca of the city. That's where everything is happening.
Because hustle and disco was such a big thing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Harvest Moon Ball, like that, usually they do a lot of ballroom. But when hustle came in, then that became another dance genre, right? So then Madison Square Garden, I guess, after doing all the other ones, hustle was another competition.
So what gave you what? This is the part that I'm interested in, right? Because a lot.
Finally, he's found something out about.
No, there's a lot of things that I'm interested in. So because situations happen to us, right? And then we were saying, I just want to try it, and to get into competition on dancing, it's a big thing, and it was a big thing back then.
Oh, and you had to practice.
You
had to go into a studio. Like we would go into a studio.
So this is like Saturday Night Fever.
Oh no, we danced better than Saturday.
Ooh, okay.
Because when we all watched,
She could have made Saturday Night Fever. Okay.
New York Hustle was very different. Than what you saw on Saturday Night. And so when I went to see the movie, I was kind of disappointed because it wasn't all this line dancing thing going on. It was very different in the city.
Oh, that's interesting.
So how did you find the partner? Where did you practice?
You meet people at the club. I mean, there were some like teams that were out there doing shows and stuff. And so I would know all the players. And then they would say, "Oh, come here, Brenda, I want you to, dance with me in this contest." And I'm like, "Okay."
It's so interesting.
And you just said, "Oh, okay."
Yep.
Yeah. So then,
and then they would throw, and I was small and petite and light, and they could throw me up in the air.
So you wait a minute, okay? Now
there's an advantage to having her as a partner. She's a good dancer, but she's also small, tiny.
Yeah. So how do you? Okay, yeah, because you got to take me to, because it involved gymnastics and all that stuff. Now you didn't have any formal training on any of that.
So let me compare it to like salsa.
Yeah.
There's that you feel that music, and you don't have to go to a dance studio to learn salsa because none of you went, right?
No.
It's just you feel that music and you just go. And Hustle was kind of like that too, because it was a partnership dancing. So. It was kind of like that. Kind of like if you had a good lead and he threw you one way, you went that way and came back.
And by the way, I've seen a video of Brenda dancing.
Can we get it?
Salsa. And
where?
Bren had it. And I saw that and I was like, well, dang, Brenda.
I want to put it in the description. I mean, yeah.
That'd be awesome.
That's why I have to watch Ben's phone.
Yes, you do.
I don't remember who. I think it was him that showed it to me. I was like, dang. Because he was telling me, yeah, it's short. But I saw you. That may have
been the Hustle though. That may have been
It was Spanish music though.
Oh, okay.
Spanish music. It was a birthday party or something, or a wedding that you guys went to, and you were dancing. I'm like, oh, Brenda wasn't lying.
See, my kids showing off all my stuff.
Oh, your stuff. So wait a minute. So you practice. How was that day? So you went to school. You were still in school, right? You were working.
I was young.
And you were young.
I could do this.
You could do this.
I couldn't do this now.
She didn't need to sleep.
So you were just going. You were just doing.
When you're like 17, 8, you have that energy.
You got all kinds of energy. Yeah.
We would go to the clubs and then right out because the clubs would close at 4:00. And then after that, a group of us would go to the beach. So we'd all have our bags. And no one had a car.
Which one?
We would go to Jones Beach. So
Jones
you'd take
Beach.
like the Long Island train, and we'd sleep on the train going, and then you'd get that burst of energy at the beach, and then coming back, everybody fall out.
Yeah.
Oh, fun times though, right?
Good. They were good times. When I think about it, it was like, man, there nothing bad happened.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So you joined the competition. You joined the local competition first. You win that. And then you go to Madison Square Garden.
What was that like?
What was that like?
I was shaken.
Really?
Well, because it's different too, but when you're looking out, you can't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
with all the lights and stuff, you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
And because you can't see who's, you can't because you're too busy spinning, and your partner's looking at it, don't mess up.
Yeah.
And it's fast. It goes fast.
Yeah.
So that was probably one exciting. That was exciting.
That was exciting. And what you say you didn't win, but did you came close to it?
I mean, I think they had first, second, third, and there was probably about 5 of us up there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't remember.
Mm.
I know I didn't come first or second.
And you didn't care.
So I'll just say I came third.
You didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to win.
Well, you went to not everybody gets to do that. You know what I mean? People go there for games and stuff, but to go there because you won
to perform
to do this thing, that's a big deal for a contest.
Yeah, if you asked me if I would do that now, I'd still love to dance. I don't know if anybody could lift me up right now. I might need they might need some help.
Oh, she's hilarious. Not true, but okay.
So then, wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, that's, because a lot of people spend a lot of time like learning to do things, but it just came innately. It just Just came out of a.
But there were a lot of talented people. I wasn't the only one that. I mean, there were a lot of people who really were good dancers back in the day.
Yeah, but it's really not a lot of people. I mean, it's a lot of people, but I'm saying like
the
it's
era.
Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it because, like Omar always tells me, you don't know how to follow.
I see
you don't follow.
But I seen you dance salsa.
She tries to lead all the time. She's like, come on.
I don't know why.
Know your role.
I know your role. Anyways, back to you. But you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like we were just talking about this the other day. Not, there's you think a lot of people are doing this, but it's not. To get to that place.
But this wasn't what was on your mind. This wasn't like
this was
fun.
Fun. This was going to the clubs and that was common in the clubs. They would always have a Saturday night contest, and you could join if you wanted to. But then if you had a partner that you always were dancing with, and your partner, there wasn't somebody you were dating either. Because my partners, I was like, no, I ain't dating you. I'll dance with you, but I won't date you.
Right. So speaking of dating, what was like at this point? You're going into your maturity level. I mean, at some point during high school and your early adolescence or early adult stage, early adulthood. Your
first love.
Okay,
let's talk about that because I know
Did you have that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I know that during your time, and we'll talk about that. That was the first thing on your.
I didn't read that
on your list
good.
Was love and romance. That was your priority during this self-reliant this thing of wanting to be your own person. Let's talk about love, and let's talk about that part.
Well. Okay, so you experience the love of your parents, and then when you're young and you meet that boy that like, oh my God, I'm in love, and you think you're in love, but it's serious though, and it hurts when you break up, and so I went through all of that.
So can you take us through it? Do you mind taking us through
so that? His name was Richie. Oh God, I hope he doesn't.
You want to bleep it out? I can bleep it out.
No. And
there was a lot of Richies back then, right?
I met him at the club.
Oh, okay.
So we were all young, and I liked him, and then and it was one of the. I think I liked him more than he liked me. But then eventually we became boyfriend and girlfriend.
Okay.
And then he found another girl.
The nerve of him.
I know, and broke my heart.
Oh. Did he just? How did that go? What did he?
It was painful because that was like my first true love. Like I thought it was my first true. I know differently now. Okay, it was a phase.
Yeah,
but
it was your first love, your first experience. At that moment,
that whole experience that you feel for this other person, and you think, it's ever after like the movies.
Yeah,
and it was the hurt of the betrayal, and then then you find yourself like, oh, I don't have a boyfriend anymore.
Did you like go through that process of like
I cried
mourning?
Like
Did you?
I mean, I did the whole
stop
you do the
eating,
whole thing,
the
crying. It took me a little bit, but not too long.
Yeah,
because then I went right back to dancing.
Right.
I went back into doing what I loved, and then that was
so your escape from that whole pit was doing the things you like to do.
Right, and you know what? He would come back to the club with his girlfriend. So that was, but I learned to face that and didn't, And the first time he came back, I was mad.
Oh, I'll bet.
I was like,
I would have been pissed too. Yeah.
But then after a while, I was like, okay,
you missed out on this. Okay.
Wow, that's how was the heartache? Because that heartache is something that is like it's hard, particularly that first love. It's hard to put it into words, that pain. Like,
because you think you're going to die.
Yes.
That's a good way to put it.
That is the perfect way to put it.
You think like your life is over and you're going to just die because this person.
You can't live without them, right?
And then you wake up and you realize I'm still alive. Okay. And then somebody else catches your eye and it's like, oh, next.
Okay.
Next.
Now, how was your sister and your parents during this stuff? Because they see you suffering, they see you crying. How were they during this when they saw you going?
Dad kind of stayed out of it because it was like, go talk to her. But I mean, it was like, it was the typical mom. Don't worry that it's your first love. You're not going to be your last. The stuff that now we tell our children, right?
Yeah.
And trying to tell me that you're not going to die. You're going to live tomorrow. It's going to be okay. That kind of thing.
Wow. So once you get over Richie.
Yeah, because what other aspirations did you have during this time? Because you're going into adulthood and stuff. So were you thinking about like like, did you want to move out of your parents' house? You know, did you get to that place? And then, like, what was that like? Did you get another job? Were you going to college?
I know I was getting older. I didn't. As soon as I graduated high school, I didn't go straight into college.
Okay.
Because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I ended up working full time
With the lawyer?
He taught me the skills to go get another job.
Okay.
And the firm ended up splitting anyway. But interesting enough, like when I finally got married, he was a person I invited to the wedding, and he came.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, he always kept in touch and everything.
Well,
else.
he helped. Do you feel like the relationship was? I mean, I don't know how deep the relationship, but he helped to develop
like
you
a
and
mentor.
stuff.
Okay, like, I mean, he taught me skills that I probably would have not learned.
Yeah, he took the time to give,
and because of him, I was able to move into other jobs. I mean, back in those days, legal secretaries made good money.
Yeah.
And then I after that, I kind of had one or two odd jobs, but then I ended up working for like the Hertz Corporation. And where else did I work? A couple of other places. But I mean, mainly I was there for a long time, the Hertz Corporation.
So when I looked at your pre-interview questionnaire, you mentioned that money was the primary motivation at this time. And one of the things that I always think about money is the reasons why you wanted it, right? What was the reasons why you wanted to work so hard during this time? Was it to move out of your parents' house, be independent, or was it for some other objective?
No, well, when I worked at 15, I was always independent. And I think when you're coming from older parents, so the older I got, the older they got. So for me, they weren't throwing me out of the house. And then there was always this, like I knew that I didn't have to depend on them and ask them for anything. So I always took care of myself. So that's why, the job was important, because then I could be self-sufficient. And I was going to school too, and I paid for my own school.
Okay.
So you were going to school?
Yeah.
To college?
And okay. When I was working full time. But I was always smart too, because I worked at jobs that had 100% tuition. Reimbursement. And so my bachelor's and master's was all paid for. Where I messed up was with this doctorate.
She messed up.
No, on my tombstone it'll be, she didn't pay in full. I still will be owing.
So the money was primarily to be self-reliant,
right, and to help out,
with your parents, because you were still living in there. And then let's talk about school, because you worked, and I guess by this time you had an idea as to which path you wanted to follow.
Not until I really got another job with the criminal justice. It was the New York City Criminal Justice Agency. And what they did basically was when you were arrested and you went to central booking, you had interviewers down there that interviewed you to assess whether they release you on your own recognizance. Would you come back?
Yeah.
And I was more the administrative, in the administrative part of that agency.
Okay. What prompted you to go back, or not back? What prompted you to start going to college? Was it just primarily, this company Hertz gave you 100%?
That was part
tuition?
of it. That was part of it. But I also realized that I was eventually going to go back. And I didn't start right away out of high school, but I knew it was something I was going to continue.
Right.
And so, the path opened up. I worked at a company that paid 100% tuition. And then I went to Hunter, which is a
CUNY college.
School, the City University of New York. So one of their colleges.
Right.
And finished that. But during my bachelor's is when my mom passed. So it was during that time, and I was going to school at night, and my mother had gotten really ill, and she was battling her diabetes and stuff. So it was a time where I was trying to juggle a full-time job, go to school, have dad at home, and now they're older, because my mom passed at like 67, so I was in my 20s.
Right.
And what kind of effect did that have on you?
There was a lot going on, and I didn't stop school. But after school I would go to the hospital, because she was hospitalized for a while, and then I would go there and then come back. I was taking care of dad at home because he was worried about her. And then I would go to the hospital to check on her because the nurses sometimes didn't really do their job. And so I'd have to go in there and crack the whip.
Right.
And that was a tough time. And then she finally had a heart attack and they couldn't revive her. And then I think I missed a week of school because we had the funeral and everything else. And so I was always I was the younger sister, but I was the one that took care of the parents.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when she passed, Dad was they were very close. I mean, they had a very special relationship, and he took it really hard. You know, so taking care of him, and then his focus then became me.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was like I knew I wasn't going to move out.
Okay.
Because on her deathbed, she said, "Promise me, you will never put your father in a home." And he was the older one.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we thought he would go first.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you look back at their relationship, like what's one of the takeaways that you take from that? I mean, it seems to be a beautiful partnership that they had, and a mutual understanding and appreciation.
Yeah, it was real.
Yeah.
It was real, and I thought that's what I always wanted for myself. It
Right.
didn't turn out like that for me though.
Right.
But that was okay. I still made it through my challenges. But I never had what they had, and I think it's rare when you find that.
Wow.
But I mean, yeah, he was always faithful to her, and vice versa.
Right.
Her to him, and family was key. Family and their faith were the two
Sure.
things that was important to them.
Right.
That brought them together. And what about you? I mean, you're losing your mother, and now you have extra responsibilities that most people won't take at this particular day and time. How were you feeling?
That was never a burden. I never thought of it as a burden because they took care of me. It didn't impose on me. I mean, I worked, came home, Dad, you okay? He was, you have to keep in mind, he was older, but he was very self-sufficient. So I wasn't taking care of him as much, I think, as he was taking care of me. So he was he could still cook. I mean, the man was,
Right. So it was just a matter of just
being company.
Yeah,
being
that
he
together.
wouldn't be alone.
Yeah.
I would never have put him in a home.
Yeah.
You were
and I
keeping
never
your
did.
promise.
Yeah, I never did.
Yeah.
What about your sister during this time?
Well, my sister, is married. She moved to Florida.
Oh, okay.
So she had her own life, and we had grown apart.
Okay.
Oh.
And what about your other sister? You
I don't
never
know.
had. Okay.
I never knew what ever happened to her.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So really only grew up with the one sister.
And
Okay.
was she not close to her? She was the sister. She was this. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of the framework. She was the oldest one, the one that you did not know.
Right.
Okay. That's what I
Never
thought.
really.
You were not close
She
with
was
her.
not
You
in
didn't
the
connect to
picture.
her. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. That's what I'm trying to get at. I'm like, okay. Because I was like, is it the
Yeah.
other
So
sister?
that's why I don't know a lot about
gotcha.
her.
Yeah. And she was much older?
I don't know if she was maybe 2 years older than my other
Your other
sister.
sister.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So now what? Now you're going through this. You're in school. You're making sure your father is okay. You're working. Now what happens now?
Okay, so I still am working, and then
Now you mentioned the criminal justice.
then eventually I transfer over to this criminal justice, and that's where I then go for my master's.
Okay.
And at one point I thought I wanted to be a lawyer too,
Okay.
so I started looking into that,
Yeah.
and then I was like, I really don't think so. I mean, but it was because criminal justice was always something that I was always a part of one way or the other, and like and you look at my path, I'm always in the courtrouse.
Okay.
I'm always somewhere where there's a case, there's something that I'm tied to
Yeah.
with some kind of criminal element. I don't
Right.
know, it was my nature or what, but it was always the
You're
field.
curious.
It was always the field that kind of I always came back to.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I'm not surprised that I am where I'm at.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. So then when did you major, like, what was your bachelor's degree? And then if you were interested always into, or a part of the criminal justice field, right? You were a part of it. Did you major in that?
No, so the bachelor's was in communications, communications media.
Okay. And then
my master's then was in criminal justice.
Okay. What was your original plan with communication and media?
Oh, I think because I didn't know what I wanted at that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you did mention you didn't know what you wanted to do, but okay.
So then criminal justice came later, and what was that thing that propelled you to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this?
So when I was working for lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
because like the first lawyer I'm working at 15, he did more civil actions. And then when I went to Hertz, it was corporate law.
Oh, okay.
So, but then when I get into like the criminal justice agency, then I get to see a whole nother field of law.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's kind of where I found the interest. Because I mean, criminal justice used to do also research for like this, for the city.
Mm-hmm.
They were contracted with the city, and they did I don't know if you ever heard of Vera Institute. They're a big research agency in New York, and they had partnered with the New York City Criminal Justice Agency, and we did a lot of research on, especially the ROR, when some that are released on their own recognizance, do they actually come back, or are we out looking for them with a warrant or something?
Right.
Yeah.
But and I stayed there for like 11 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's where I met my husband. I get married. I get divorced.
Okay, so that's good, because that will lead us perfectly into the next part of our conversation. Yeah, the second phase of your life, so to speak. So now we're sort of talking about your maturity stage, and this is the stage where people are sort of finding their professional footing. They're establishing strong relationships, and sort of really finding their way, and sort of that's what we're interested in knowing about. So you're talking about getting married.
So
and
I get married and it's all going good. And I guess because I'm really good at investigating things, it wasn't good for him. So I was
this is actually a really good story.
Yeah,
I don't know how much she's going to tell us, but it's pretty good.
Oh, I'll tell you it all.
Let's start with how you guys met and how that particular part before pre-marriage come about.
Okay, let me think. Okay, he used to do karate.
Okay.
And I had a friend who was doing karate in the same dojo he was. And we went to go pick up her sister who was taking the class. And he saw me there. So he asked the sister, "Who's that?" And then that's how it started.
Right.
And then we went on a date, and then I guess at some point fell in love, and then he said, "Will you marry me?" And I said yes. So
right.
But and it was all good. I thought this was it. I thought this was the happily ever after.
Right.
And he worked at a company, and then he also did like sound for the bands, the salsa bands.
Oh, okay.
So he was in the clubs, and
this is what, 80s, 90s, 80s?
no, this is 90s, because I got married in the 90s.
Okay, 90s.
And then one, just kind of that womanly instinct, and I always tell my friends, when that hits, go with it.
Right.
And and it was funny because my friends, if he was a nice guy, everybody loved him.
Right.
And when I said no, I think something's going on, they're like, "No, Brenda, he's so nice. He would never do that to you." And I was like, "All right, I'm telling you, something's not going right." And at that point, we had just bought a house in Pennsylvania. So I thought, okay, I got the house, I got the husband, got dogs.
And you still have your dad at home too.
Dad was,
right.
Dad was living with me. I mean, he came, I took him.
He's part of the package.
He's part of the package.
That's it. Okay.
And he was good about all of that.
Yeah.
But I guess the clubbing, he must have met somebody. And we still had my father's apartment in the city.
Okay.
So, and me being the caring wife would say, you know what, it's too late to drive all the way to Pennsylvania, because our home was in Pennsylvania. Why don't you stay at the apartment and just come in the morning? Well, then that became like, okay, I'm gonna stay at the apartment.
So this is when he would go do his gigs or whatever at the club, because he wasn't just clubbing without you. He was going to do these jobs, right? These things.
Right.
Working.
Right.
Work. Oh, he was working.
Well, he really was working. It was after the working.
Okay.
He was doing
He was putting overtime.
He was
right. Extracurricular activities.
putting in overtime, this guy says.
Gotcha. So how did you find out that he was doing this? Because at first the instinct,
this is a delicious story.
the instinct comes out, and this is the second time we talked about instinct, and we're going to touch on that later. So the instinct comes out, and so how do you follow that instinct, and what do you do?
So I was still getting the bills from the telephone because we still had a telephone hooked up in the apartment.
Okay.
So my gut was like, something's going on. So I called up at that point it was like Bell South or something. And I called up and I said, I would like to, can I have a listing of the numbers and the calls going out of this number at home, blah, blah, blah. So I finally get the bill because they couldn't email it to me because nowadays they mailed, I had to wait.
To mail it, yeah.
So I get this and then all of a sudden it's like all these numbers and I know they're not mine. And they were, that's when the detective in me comes out and then I'm like looking at all the times that the calls are coming in, see like 3 numbers that are the same. And I'm thinking, okay, so this one, at that point, people had pagers. So I figured that one of them was a pager. And one had to be a work number and a house number. And they were all late at night in the morning. I mean, it was just odd times.
Yeah.
And never when he was with me. So I went to work the next day. And I said to my friend, I need you to do me a favor. And call this number. Tell them you're calling because you need a sound guy for a band. Is he available? And so she calls, and the girl says, he's not here right now. But can I take a message for him? So she said, oh, no, she goes, I'll call him back. Do you know when he's going to be back? And she says, yeah, probably later on this evening.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay. So she hung up the phone, and I took a breath, and then I called.
Yeah.
And then I said, this is so-and-so's wife. Who are you? And that was it. But it ended up being that was her sister who picked up the phone. And then
the other lady, the other girl's sister. Okay.
So she said, I think you want to talk to my sister. So I said, yeah, I think I might want to talk to your sister. So I said, what's her which one of these numbers can I reach her at? And then I called her and I was very polite. I wasn't cursing up a storm. I handled it very well. Told her I could pack his bags and deliver it to her in Brooklyn if she wanted. And then she just
so then after, how did you confront him? How was that confrontation?
Okay, so he had a Pathfinder that was in both our names. So I left work one day early. I had the extra set of keys and drove that Pathfinder all the way to Pennsylvania. So when he came at the apartment at that point, and he realized he couldn't find the car. And I left him a message and I said, hey, if you're looking for the Pathfinder, it's parked in Pennsylvania in the house we bought together. Yeah. And then he went off.
He went off.
Yeah, because it was like castration because I took his car.
Was that just a response out of anger because he was caught?
He got busted.
He got busted?
But karma comes back.
Okay.
So the girl that he was so head over heels was, she had 2 kids. And at this point, Willie and I didn't have any children yet. And so she actually had a boyfriend, and then she would call him over to take care of her kids.
Oh, my gosh.
So when I say karma comes back, he got it back.
What do you mean? What happened?
Well, because he didn't realize she had a boyfriend and that he was babysitting the kids while she was going to hook up with her boyfriend.
So the player got played.
Okay, he sure did.
And then what happened too was when he found out that I found out. I mean, and it was humiliation for him because the wife then finds out you got played.
Yeah.
And then I told him, I said, so the wife that was very faithful to you all these years, all this time, you didn't appreciate it, and then you got what you got.
What did he say to all that?
He he couldn't say much. There was like nothing you could say. It was like, okay, mud on my face.
Now, did he try to sway you back to?
No, we agreed to go to counseling.
Okay.
So
after all this happened, you agreed? Okay.
Yeah, I think women are more forgiving, or will try at least. And we went a couple of sessions, and I don't think his heart was in it. I remember exactly the last day of the counseling session because the counselor said to him, hey, listen, if this is going to work, you guys need to live together. Because at that point he was still staying in the city.
Yeah.
And then he said to me, he said, well, I'll have lunch with her on days because we worked close. And then he says, and then I'll go up on the weekends, but I'll come back. So she looked at me and she said, Brenda, what do you think? I turned around to her. I said, I think it's time for that D word. I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I turned around to him and I said, I'm worth more than 11 hours.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And that was it. Now, how did you feel about growing up Catholic and this being frowned upon? That's a big deviation from that. That's
back in the day.
Back in the day.
I think, well, back in the day, it was more strict. But at the point of where I was in my life, when I tried to go to counseling, that was my effort to try to save the marriage. But I don't think, I don't think you can force somebody to love you. And I never wanted a life like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was worth more than the 11 hours he was willing to offer me. And so that was an easy decision for me. No guilt. I did what was right for me.
Because you did right. Yeah. Well, you did what was right for you, but you also tried to make the effort.
I made the effort, and
yeah, for sure. And that's all you can do.
Yeah.
You can't.
What about your dad? What did he say about this?
He was older, so he just wanted me to be happy.
Okay.
And he said, if you're happy, and he actually said it too. He said, you can't force a man to love you.
That's true.
And those were some really powerful words. And he was absolutely true.
Oh.
That you can't.
Yeah. When somebody checks out and you realize that they checked out and they don't love you, to have that, not to chase after that person or whatever, and just know that this is it.
Now, like he's on my Facebook. We talk. No, we don't talk. We'll wish each other happy birthday. And like I've seen all the girlfriends he's had. He's not remarried either.
No.
You're courteous.
And it sounds like, like all his girlfriends kind of either one way or something did something to him.
Yeah.
So what about the logistics now that you arrived at this decision? How long did it take you to go through the divorce, and how did the assets and the separation and all that stuff took place? Because
what was that transition?
That could be a mess. That could be a mess. It
really wasn't as bad of a mess as because we had bought the house. He thought he was doing me a favor when he said he would give me everything. So I said no deal, because everything's not paid for.
Right.
And because he wanted me to take his name off the house. I think I don't know. He served me separation papers on my birthday.
Oh, wow.
So that didn't go over too well.
Yeah.
But in the end I said, no, we're in this together and you get exactly what I get.
Right.
And I ended up selling the house, bankruptcy and everything. So I had like this whole, life thing just kind of hit bottom, and I had to rebuild.
Yeah.
So, and he stayed in New York, and he had a good job, and
So,
I was in PA, stuck with a house in the winter.
So you had to go into bankruptcy to get rid of the house. So can you if you don't mind, can you take us through that, because that's a process that could be very tough.
Yeah, it's
people.
it's
It's devastating for some people.
Well, I always knew that I could survive. I'm a survivor. I don't give up. And I had, at that point, I had a house that I was going to lose. I had my dad, and I had to take care of. So it was not just me. I wasn't just packing me up and moving out. So I had to pack up dad, and I got an apartment like closer in the city in PA. And life began new. And the bankruptcy I knew was going to be on me, and I would have to build that. And I also had to take a cut in pay and work. And then I ended up working in Pennsylvania, and it's different. It's not New York. The pay is different. And I ended up working for a child service. I was a caseworker. So I completely went like from making a real high salary to a low salary. So it was very humbling too. But I took it.
How were those times in which, it's inevitable that in times like that, even if you have the support of your wonderful father, you feel alone, you feel deserted. How were you able to deal with that darkness and that solitude?
I think when you're going through like a divorce and things like that, at some point, like everything, you mourn it, and then you come out of it. And so the lesson you learn when you come out of it is the important lesson. And I realized that the divorce was just that. It was something that wasn't going to work. but it didn't change who I was. My path was going to change. I had to rebuild. Did I resent the fact that I had to do that? Was I angry for a little bit? Yes.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay in a state of anger or resentment, or else I would never have moved on. And I thought at that point, the process for me was I had to move on
Yeah.
because I wasn't going to get anywhere. I couldn't be the victim. I had to move on.
Yeah.
And I had to take care of Dad. So, there was a responsibility there.
Yeah.
And that seems to be my pattern. I'm just telling you, that seems to be, challenge after challenge after challenge. And it's like,
So then what's the next? Well, so what happens next? So you take this lower paying job, and what happens with you
I
next?
mean, so life goes on. And then at some point I meet my son's father.
Okay.
And I met him because then I ended up taking martial arts. And that's what really kept me going. And I was focused somewhere else. And then
So this is almost like that, like when the dance came in, took your mind off of things.
Yeah, right. And then karate comes in, and I'm like really good at this too. And I'm like, all right, punching bags and everything.
Felt
I'm
good.
getting all my frustrations out.
Felt good, right? Yeah.
So I meet my son's father, and so we get together, and then then I get pregnant, and I'm like, no, this can't be happening to me.
Right.
And I told him, you don't have to marry me. I'm okay. And I don't want to hold you because of this. And I decided that regardless, I was going to have this baby.
Yeah. Now, were you not that serious? Is that why you said that, or were you just sort of just like?
I mean, I think we were like getting there, but I didn't want to force somebody.
Yeah.
Just to be with me because I was, I wanted it. If you're going to be with me, be with me.
Yes.
Not because I'm having a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he stayed through the pregnancy and everything else. But that went south too. And then to top it off, then of course, Ben was a preemie.
Right.
And so that was a whole nother.
So tell us about that, Ben, and this challenging situation.
So I mean, everything's going fine, and then Ben decides he's going to come early.
How early is early?
He was supposed to be born like late January, February, and he came on Christmas Eve.
Oh, okay.
So he was like 6 weeks.
Okay.
And my water broke. I mean, it was my doctor's appointment. I was going in for my doctor. I was like, and I was driving from Pennsylvania to New York because I was still kind of working in New York, even though I was living in, because I think I fast forwarded because I was still working in New York. It's after I had been that I started working in PA.
Okay.
But so I have this doctor's appointment, and I'm like, I think I have to go to the bathroom because I'm like, oh my God, like I can't hold it.
Yeah.
And then I get up and my water breaks.
Oh.
I'm like, what is this? Nobody told me this happened. So, and it was like, it's December, so it's snowing. And we had stopped off at Ben's father's parents' house. And they lived up there the hospital Ben was born in was Mount Sinai. On that was like 95th Street and 5th Avenue or part, I forget, or Central. It was like near Central Park, but it was on the east side. And so they put me in a cab and take me to the hospital, and I'm like, this can't be happening. We're calling my doctor saying, I'm going to miss that appointment because the water broke. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
So we get there, and then now, your water breaks, they're not letting you go.
No.
So they admitted me, and I think my water broke on the 22nd. So I'm sitting there for 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Ben doesn't want to come out. I'm sitting there like, this can't be happening.
Yeah.
So then fast forward, Ben comes on the 24th, like 11:10.
Right.
And so 50 minutes right before Christmas Day. And then I go down and they take him right away downstairs because he's early. They want to take him to the NICU.
Yeah.
And everything seems fine. And I'm sharing a room with this other lady, and she had a boy too, and they're all happy, and the baby's up in the room, but not my baby.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think the social worker comes up like the next morning, and she tells me there's some issues with Ben. We're going to hold him in the NICU for a couple of days, so we can't release him. And I was running a fever, so they couldn't release me either. And and what ends up happening is Ben's stomach expands, and then they found blood in his stool. And that just started the whole ball game. And they found out that he had holes in his intestines.
Oh, no.
So then the doctor, she comes up and tells me, I'm going to let the doctor talk to you. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And so they tell me this whole thing. And of course, it's like life-threatening. And they tell me I could stay at the hospital. They had to do exploratory surgery on him. Now, he's a newborn.
Yeah.
And they take him up and they cut him open. And I come down and I see that. And I'm like, oh, my God, he's got wires, everything, the whole NICU scene.
Yeah.
And then, but now he's got like this big bandage over his little tummy and he's still all puffed up. And then we find out that, they tell me, oh, well, I'm not sure what we can do for him. So we're going to let you stay the night in case he passes in the night.
Oh, my God. That's devastating.
So they know, like, I'm Catholic. And they asked me, do you want the priest to baptize him? So I'm like, yes. And the priest comes down, and like, it's like this, this dark cloud in the NICU now. And he's all the way in the back. And the priest comes and everybody's just like, they know. And they, like they don't know what to, because all the mothers are experiencing something. If you're in the NICU, your baby came too early, something's going on. So everybody, and that was the way in the NICU. Everybody was always respectful. So he baptizes Benjamin, and that was, I just, kind of lost it then. But I think that was a turning point too, in terms of the faith, because I was mad. Before the baptism, I was mad. I was like, why would you do this? Why would you let me give birth to a baby and then take it right away? Yeah. But then after something whatever happened in the baptism was, because I kind of like gave him up, like I surrendered and said, if you want him, then I guess you must have a purpose for him. But if I get to keep him, then that means he has a purpose, and I have to make sure he gets there. Yeah. So that was that. And then Ben gradually, started coming around. We were in the NICU for like 3 months. I call him my holiday baby because we got there for Christmas. We spent New Year's. Yeah. Valentine's, he has his like basic final surgery. Because he had they went in like 2 times after that, because it wasn't something you could see on an x-ray. Yeah. They had to go in. And every time they went in, they had the bowel transplant team, because they said he would have to have we would have to get a donor to have him have a transplant. And then of course I'm feeling guilty because I'm thinking another baby has to die in order to give it to Ben. Yeah. So you make friends with all the moms, and so I was there for 3 months. I was like the welcome committee. I was like, this is how it's going to happen. It's going to be fine, Yeah. And Ben was, Ben had everybody. It was like big. Then he became Big Ben because he was getting bigger than the other ones. But he still, even when he came home, he was born at 5 pounds, so he still had some good weight. But when we left the hospital, like 3 months later, he was 7'11". So he was the size of a newborn. Yeah. Yeah. So, all the healthcare workers were really good. And there was some lessons learned in there too. You let your faith you just go with it. Yeah. And, then the hardest lesson is you can't control it. Yeah. I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring, because every day was a roller coaster ride. He'd be good one day, and then the next day maybe not so good, and you're panicking. And every time he had to go back in for surgery, you never knew what the outcome was going to be. Yeah.
It must have been really it must have been really tenuous. Were you really emotional? You share the story, and I know the story, but you share the story now, and it makes me tear up. But were you really did you lose it emotionally, or did you just? Oh yeah. Okay. So you had a lot of that.
But what I did do was I had a journal, and so every day that I wrote him a letter in the journal. And so when I go back every now and then and I read it and I see where my emotions were, and you could tell where I'm upset about something, or I'm questioning my faith, and then all of a sudden I'm back on track, or that Ben had a good day, Ben had a bad day, right.
But he does come home, which is good.
He does come home.
Sorry. Before we go into that, so what was your support system outside of your faith during that time?
All my friends. Ben's father was for a while, and then he just another one. I don't know.
But during this time, he just
he was there. But I don't. It wasn't he didn't support me when I needed it. Okay. And I knew he was going through his things, but I was there for Ben, and I couldn't pay attention to his needs at that point. And, and that's, I think, and he, he wanted attention. So I was like, there's only one of me.
Yeah.
And right now, the one that needs the attention is the child I'm trying to save.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to leave him there.
No. So, but my friends were all really supportive. They would come and see Ben, and see me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so the support system was good. And I think they were all shocked too.
You had good friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. I
and
have to
what
say.
about your dad during this time?
Well, Dad was in PA.
Right.
So,
who was
I
taking
stayed. My neighbor, one of my neighbors, was keeping an eye on him for me because it was around. For when I came home, let's just say when I came home in March, the Christmas tree was still up.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, but I stayed I wouldn't leave the hospital.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, nurses were like, "Mom, you got." I was like, "Yeah, I'll be back." It was like 7 to 7. That was the shift.
Yeah.
I was there at 7. Kind of went and ate dinner, came back, and welcomed the next shift.
Yeah.
And they were really good with me because they would give me a pillow, let me sleep on the couch outside. Because there's that maternal instinct too. I knew when he was having a bad day.
Yeah.
And then I would stay close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. So, so you do get to bring Ben home, obviously. So how is that transition from being in the NICU every day to now I'm home? Because you brought him to Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
So now you're back home because
So
you
now
didn't work during this time or
No,
anything.
I took 2 years off.
Yeah.
I took 2 years off, and then I had a big pension from my job, and at that point, you know what? I had never been on like public assistance, so I didn't even know anything about public assistance that I could have. And I find out later. I'm like, man, I just blew out my whole pension.
When you could have gotten assistance,
right? And so I'm like, I'm living on this thing for like 2 years, and but that's the sacrifice you make because I knew I didn't want anybody else taking care of Ben.
No, yeah.
But I mean, Grandpa was very happy to see him.
Oh, I'm sure.
And Benjamin is named after his grandfather.
Oh, yeah.
So and that was cute to see them,
interact.
Yeah, because that was sweet. That was really sweet.
Yeah.
And he was very excited that he was named after Benjamin.
Oh, I'll bet.
Or that Benjamin was named after him.
Yeah.
But as they started to switch, one getting older and one getting younger. I mean, yeah. I had 2 children.
Yeah,
it didn't matter. I was taking care of
You're
2 Benjamins.
both of them. Yeah. So he's getting older and more dependent on you then.
Both of them.
Okay. Well, we know Ben is, but your father is.
Well, he's still older, but he's still self-sufficient.
Yeah, because I don't want to tell your story, but okay. Yeah. So, but you were taking care of both of them. How was the transition into having Ben home and like? Well, at some point you had to go back to work.
Right. And when you come home from the NICU, like at the NICU, they're all attached to stuff. So when something's going on, the bells and whistles go off. So
Yeah.
You come home, they're not attached to anything.
Yeah.
And you don't know if he needs something. So like I was kind of like awake 24/7.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because that first couple of days, because I was kind of in that panic mode. But then I got used to it. And Ben was really thriving.
Good. Yeah.
So he was really doing well.
That's good.
How
was he as a baby?
He was a good baby.
Was he?
He was a good baby because he went through a lot, and then, like they poked him, everything. But I mean, he was a really good baby. He slept. He wasn't a cranky baby. Now he is.
He's still a cranky baby.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So as you progressed, right? You have how does Ben's dad now that he's home? How does he interact and what happens in that relationship?
So I would say he was trying to be a good dad, but another one that just couldn't get it together. And so as a mother, then my maternal instinct was to protect my son. And it wasn't like he wasn't abusive to me, but I could see where it could have been. And we both did martial arts together.
Right.
So... And what I didn't like is every time we had a disagreement, he would pick up Ben and hold the baby. And then, he knew then I wouldn't attack. I wouldn't say anything. I would be like, put the baby down. Because as soon as he put the baby down, I was ready to knock him out. And so I didn't like that. I didn't like that you're picking up our son to put him in the middle of, an argument here.
Yeah.
Didn't like that. And I knew at that point, your days are numbered here. And another one, I was just like, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at this point I'm just asking, I guess, you're at a different stage in your life. You've already experienced heartbreak in your relationship. So you're at a different stage in your life, and now you have Ben, and he's like the center of your world along with your father,
Right.
because you're taking care of these two men or these two people. Right. And so you don't got time for this BS with this person. So it was easy for you to determine your days are numbered, right? So then when you realized that, what was that like? Did you just take your focus and put it on Ben, the two Bens, or what was going on there? Because you all eventually you had to go back to work, and then I know that you transitioned after that as well. So tell us about that.
So eventually he gets to leave because I kind of put his stuff in a garbage bag and put it outside.
You say he gets to leave. I helped him to get to leave. Okay.
No, he gets to it. There's no help. It's like he gets to leave.
You get to leave here.
And we had, we had the same dojo friends.
Right.
So they came, I think, over to the house to protect him, not me.
Hilarious.
Because I was like, this is my house. And I'm not having this.
Yeah.
No.
We're not going to raise my son this way. And I said to him, "This is my son, because you're not. This is unacceptable." Because I thought, at some point I didn't want him. Ben was, he was already a sick baby. I was, no, and I was fine. I could handle myself by myself.
We had already experienced this
so
stuff, so yeah.
And Ben was my priority. And that was it. There was no, I didn't think twice.
Right.
And I think that's when you're a mom and your son or your daughter has gone through something and your partner's not going to be supportive and start playing these games. That is a very easy choice.
Yeah.
It was for me.
Yeah.
There was no, maybe. No,
right.
It was no, you're out.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happens? I mean, you've been in the criminal justice system and you've seen a lot of families, so you worked in that. What is it about certain men and the immaturity of not taking not taking responsibility for their part? I mean, you grew up with a family that had a core,
right?
And both parents took care of you.
And it's unfortunate because it's not a monetary thing. Yeah, you're going to pay child support, right? You bought this, it's only fair. But it wasn't even that, because he really wasn't even paying a lot of child support. I mean, I could have done without the money. Let's just say that. But, as a father, he wasn't there for him. He would make promises. I'm going to come see you. Like, as he got older, then I'm going to come see you. I mean, he eventually, his dad eventually gets married and has 2 children. And then, it was like every other, Ben's getting older, and Ben is now able to talk to his dad, and it was always these false promises. I'm going to come see you. I'm going to, and then I would have to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
Because what I never did was I never badmouthed his dad.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want Ben to think that his dad didn't love him. I thought that was important, that he had to know that, whatever issues we had, it was our issues. It wasn't Ben's issues.
Right.
And that, his father was good at a point, but just not good enough to stay.
Yeah.
Not to father him.
Right.
The way he should. And he made that choice.
Right.
And he made the choice to not be in contact with him.
Right.
And, Ben always wanted that father figure, but the disappointment was starting to show. And I remember one day at 10 years old, because now we've had him call, it was a constant, I'm going to, Christmas is coming. I mean, his birthday is on Christmas Eve. That is not a hard time to remember when your son's birthday.
Your son's birthday is.
And then, so he wouldn't even call. And there would be these random calls. I mean, and we're not talking days. We're talking years. And at 10 years old, Ben finally, we get that one last call. And took me 2 weeks to tell Ben, but after I reamed his father out on the phone. And so I had sit down with Ben. We're having dinner. And I said to him, hey, got to ask you a question. Your dad called. And Ben, looks up. And I said, he wants to know if, he can call you. So I said, I'm going to let you make that decision. And Ben was, and then, with the saddest thing is when you see your kid's eyes tear up. And he did. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah. So I was like, what's wrong? Talk to me. He goes, Mom, all I want is a dad. So I was like, And I said, well, what would a dad be? And he said, well, he could take me to the baseball games. He'd take me fishing, all the things a son wants. And then he said, hey, Mom, and then when you go shopping and help you with the groceries. And I was like, yeah. I said, well, but what about your dad? I said, are you going to give him a second chance or third chance? I said, what do you want to do? And he says, then he tells me, well, why can't you just get married and get me a dad? So I said, well, it's not like I can go to Walmart and buy one, find one, or, Bolo.
Bolo.
So he says, I said to him,
be on the lookout. That's hilarious.
So he didn't, then his bottom line, he goes, okay, Mom, I'll give him one more chance.
Right.
Mm.
And so here's the son that's willing to give him a chance, and he didn't follow through.
Wow.
So after that, then I think, I was waiting for Ben to get to that stage where he could figure this out, that Dad wasn't going to keep his word.
Yeah.
And at that point, that was the turning point for Ben.
Mm-hmm. And then so he made the decision on his own to sort of.
And he never talked about his dad again.
Yeah. And the dad never tried to reach again.
He tried once. And then, because the child support kept on stopping. And he made the mistake of calling one day. So I traced his phone number. And then I called child support. Yeah, the detective came in. I called child support services. Here's the number that he called me from. And then but I'm telling you, like, the money wasn't the issue, because I'm telling you, it wasn't like he was not paying a lot of child support.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not for that.
Yeah.
But it affects, the child when the father or with any parent is not responsible or it's not there.
Well, especially a son. And I think that was the lesson for me, because, I was always the mom that went to the baseball games and I thought, I'm doing this right. Yeah. And then it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I did, because what was missing was that father figure.
Yeah. So now all of this took place while you were in Pennsylvania. And so now at this point, where you transition to, where were you at this point? You're working.
I'm still working. So that was 10. But so before all of that, when Ben was about 3, that's when my dad passes. And that triggered a whole different lifestyle. That's what brought me to Florida.
Okay.
Tell us about his passing. And,
so
he lived
100 and what?
I know.
Wow.
So we celebrated his 101st birthday on that Saturday, and then he passed on that Tuesday. But he died of old age.
Yeah.
And he died in the house, but he died in his sleep.
Okay.
And I was so happy, because I figured he went peacefully.
Yeah.
But I was at work, and I knew when I left that morning, I knew something was not right.
Right.
And I just kind of sensed it, Took Ben to daycare. And I remember at 3:00 sitting at my desk, and I got this feeling, and I couldn't wait till 5:00, happened. And then I go home and I go in the room, and it's dead quiet.
Wow.
And Ben comes in with me, and I'm like, I don't know, let me see what I'm walking into.
Yeah.
And he was in a fetal position the way I left him.
Really?
And he had passed, because when I touched him, he was really, and then Ben comes in, Grandpa's sleeping.
No.
And so, in PA, you have to call the police so that they don't think that you had some, it's they have to make sure that you didn't do something.
Yeah.
And then we had the ambulance, the medics had to come in and then declare him deceased. And then we had to call the funeral home. So they go in there, and Ben is still with me, and they bring my father out. And they bring him in, the funeral parlor did really nice, but they covered them all up. And Ben starts having a fit, how they need to, Grandpa can't breathe. They got him all covered up. And I'm like, it's okay. And then I had to explain to a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I can't remember, I think it was 3 or 4, death.
Yeah.
And that was interesting.
Okay.
So I kind of said, Grandpa's up in heaven. And, what does Ben know about heaven?
Yeah.
At
that age, yeah.
Yeah. So, and there happened to be this really bright star. So I said, you see that star? That's Grandpa looking down. He's telling us he's okay. And he's in heaven with Grandma. So he's like, oh, he is? So, and then I'm explaining to him how, he won't be with us anymore, but we'll always feel him.
Yeah.
And so Ben he gets it for a little bit, because then one day we're coming out of CVS and it's nighttime, and there's this big shining star, and he says, there's Grandpa, and I'm having a fit in the parking lot. I'm thinking, my God, there's a ghost somewhere. Where's what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm looking around, because I'm like, what do you see that I'm not seeing? Ben seeing dead people.
No,
oh my God.
That's not what I need right now. That's not what I need.
That's
and
hilarious.
then he points up to this bright shining star. So I'm like, but almost had a heart attack in the parking lot.
Oh.
And how was the passing of your your dad for you then? Knowing, I mean, I know that you're saying he died from old age and he died 101 years old. That's that's a long life.
Yeah.
How was that for you though?
It was bittersweet. It was.
You were daddy's girl, right?
I was daddy's girl. Yeah. He taught me everything. I think he gave me the tools to make me who I am.
There's
tissue.
Right.
I'm sorry. You already started making me tear. I'm looking like this so the camera doesn't see me. Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, take your time.
Take your time.
I'd be crying with Ben's story, not this one.
Oh.
She had to go say daddy's girl.
Yeah.
Dad did it.
That did it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I am
I'm
a daddy's
sorry.
girl. Okay, I'll get back when I do my interview with you.
Yeah. You need to get her back.
She will get me back.
Yeah.
But Ben is somewhat like him sometimes, but not like him. But yeah, so that was rough.
Yeah.
But
But he equipped you for the person that you are today. So
to raise Ben.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys both talked about?
Well, he protected Ben because he didn't like when I yelled at Ben. The two of them would, they would like gang up on me sometimes. So like Ben had a SpongeBob cup, and Grandpa would always have like water in his cup by his bed.
Oh,
and he took Ben's SpongeBob cup.
Right.
And all hell broke loose one night because I hear him screaming and I hear my father telling him, get him out of my room, get him out of my room. And Ben's yelling, but Grandpa has my cup. Grandpa.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So I'm like the two of them, I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to lose my mind. But I mean, they had a very sweet relationship too.
Yeah.
But I wasn't allowed to yell at Ben. He says, oh, he's only a baby. Why are you yelling at the baby? He's only a baby. He's only a baby. And so I'd get in trouble anyway.
That's cute. So then you go back to, so your dad passes, you fast forward.
You're still in Pennsylvania.
So what was your transition? How did you end up, because you mentioned that you ended up in Florida. So how did you end up in Florida?
Because I decided then at that point, I either was going to move back to New York or Florida.
Okay.
Why Florida?
Well, actually, you know what? Florida. The reason why I picked Florida is because at that point, Ben and I were March of Dimes ambassador families.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And there was a position for a director for March of Dimes in Fort Lauderdale. And one of the ladies that I had worked with said, hey, Brenda, I think you'd be really good at this. And I figured, okay, I have no ties now because Dad passed.
Yeah.
And that's really why I stayed there, because I didn't want to move him around.
Yeah, correct.
So I said, okay. So I had an interview on the phone. And I said, okay, whatever comes first. If I get a New York job, I'll go to New York. And so that was it.
Yeah,
Whichever one.
okay.
And Florida came through first.
Okay.
But it's interesting how things happen, because they offered me the job, but they also offered to move me. So all my moving expenses. So it was like, wow.
That's awesome.
So I ended up going with them, and I moved to Fort Lauderdale first.
Okay.
And so we stayed there. Ben started school there. And my friends were all shocked because I had no family here.
Yeah. You were coming down here by yourself. Just with
just
you and
packed
Ben.
it up. We packed up the truck, and I was like, you know what? I got this. And my friends were all like, oh my God, there's not going to be anybody there for you. And I was like, I'm in Pennsylvania and you guys aren't here for me now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what was the difference? And then they're all moved here. I'm like, what was the point? I was trying to get away from you guys.
Right. Yeah.
So yes. And that's how my friend actually, how I got to IRSC was, my friend was retiring from NYPD, and they had heard about, like the police, how they do things here, and they knew more about the college than I did.
Oh wow!
And then he said, "Oh, I think Brenda, there's a criminal justice. You should apply."
Right.
And so I did, and then actually applied for like a program coordinator position. And didn't get that one, and then that Banner Center came out, and then that's how I started.
So then you started IRSC, and then
so the rest is history. Now.
Yeah, but what was the position? You weren't a program coordinator for Banner. Were you for Banner? Okay, all right. I mean, I already know.
Right, and then you could take the interview over now. Jesse,
I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard because for me to ask questions is like, I mean, I already know this, so I'm trying not to answer the question. But so how was that for you? So did you end
it
up?
was a good move. I think it was a good
You
move
moved
for
up
me.
to the Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce
Right,
area.
yeah, and got a house when the market was
Okay.
good.
What
and then
what
as
about
soon
what
as-
year is that? Like you think?
Well, I started 2007,
Okay. Okay.
and so that was when the market was. It was okay.
Yeah.
It was
still
good.
pretty.
And I thought it was pretty good. And as soon as I bought my house, the market crashed.
Yeah.
And then my house was worth nothing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I stayed in that house for like 10 years until
Yeah.
now that I was
Right.
able to buy a new house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely house. So what's in terms of being at Indian River State College, how is that for you and your are you feeling more settled in your professional career? I
think,
mean,
you know-
you also you mentioned that you got a doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Oh, that was challenging. I don't
So you
know what possessed me. You see all these gray hairs? That's probably from the dissertation.
So you got your doctorate in?
Business administration with a specialization in criminal justice.
Okay.
There's always that criminal justice.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's always been your thing. So it's,
And it wasn't for, at this age, it wasn't for, it was on my bucket list.
mm-hmm.
I always thought I'm going to get that doctorate
Mm-hmm.
because that's as high as I could go.
Mhm.
And it was to make up, I guess, for being that first generation
Yeah.
Yeah.
and something to show Ben
Yeah.
and see where he goes.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to see where he goes.
That'd be your
He's
next
still
interview.
young. He's still young.
He is.
Yeah, he is. So then, so what's it? Are you able to utilize your doctorate in your position at the college? Like, where are you at with that right now? Like,
I get to adjunct. So
Okay,
that's
that's good.
really good.
Yeah.
And I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
because I think it's something. It keeps you in line with the students.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps you in line with the curriculum, the academics part.
Did you get and you get to share back, and pass
Yes.
information down to the young people coming up.
And,
Yeah.
and the Brenda that I know, and you'd mentioned this earlier in your interview about being connected to like children and whatnot. I don't remember
Right.
what capacity you actually mentioned that, but you've
I
always had that.
I've always advocated for
An advocate. That's what I would say.
the young people because
Mhm.
I was a caseworker and saw what kids go through. But I also advocate for the older people because
Right.
I worked for like the welfare office in Pennsylvania and saw like sometimes how abusive family members could be.
to the
you know,
elderly.
To the
right when
elderly.
they're
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
get all their benefits and
yeah,
I mean it was
take their money.
Yeah, that's
So those are the two groups that I
Okay.
always say I advocate. Anybody in the middle can fend for themselves.
right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So then at the college right now, I mean, you don't have to disclose everything, but how are you feeling in terms of your career, your professional career, where you're at currently?
I think I'm finally moving.
Okay.
Like more challenges, which challenges your ability to do things. I think now you kind of see the potential to grow, whereas there was a time when you didn't see that.
Right.
But now I think under different leadership, yeah, it's there. So we'll see what the next phase is because that's a pretty new phase.
Right. Okay. That's good. I like that. You're actually in a place where I feel like you've been, because I've known you for a long time, that you've been really, really just trying to get there, and it just finally opened up.
Right.
And now you're
sometimes it
here.
just takes a different person to see that
Yeah.
in you.
Yeah, and that's that's okay.
And it's
So-
leadership.
yeah.
It's the different leaderships we've been through.
Right. So that's good. I think you're in a good place professionally, personally from the outside. I see that. I think it's
so.
a good
And
thing.
and the things I do on the side, like with the sheriff's office.
Yeah, I was going to say you're very connected to the agencies, law enforcement, right?
So and all of that. I mean, all of those degrees and all of those life experiences plays into what you give back.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I'm big on giving back.
Okay. So at this point, now that you've told us your whole life story, which has been amazing, because I mean, I've always known your story, but I think it's amazing that you're sharing it with the world. We go through the portion at the end of our interviews where we sort of want to have like a reflection. And so this is where Omar sort of takes over with introducing the skiar. And
The idea with the skiar reflection is that we just to look back and reflect on the things that you've learned, the things that have become known to you. And the idea behind this segment is really to share your life experiences with others that may not be going to the exact same thing because everybody's paths and everybody's quest is completely different, but there's always commonalities amongst them. And I want to ask you like a few specific questions,
Okay. Well,
and a couple of general questions too. So like the first one that I want to ask is, there's been many times in your journey, and I kind of like touched on this earlier before. There's been many times in your quest in which you had to dig deep internally, and that scares a lot of people to be able to go to that place.
mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us about that, how you felt, and the lessons that you learned by digging deep into yourself?
Good question. So I think sometimes what you fear the most is what keeps you from moving on. And I think sometimes we have to own what we do. We have to own our challenges, and we have to face them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can pass them until you do. And I think for me, my journey there was a lot of challenges. There were a lot of times I had to go into deep thought, you're right, and see, not to give up.
Mm-hmm.
The future was still the future. I was only living in the present. And I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring because it hasn't happened yet. And so not to write the end of my story before it came. And so for me, it was always I knew that sometimes even in tragic moments, there are lessons there. And so this is my 6 decades now moving forward. And so what I've learned is like, sometimes when if you don't get that job, you get disappointed, but maybe that's the reason that you didn't get it. There's going to be something else that opens up that couldn't have opened up if you had gotten that job. Yeah. And I think sometimes with our journeys, that's the same thing. I mean, I've had some really good experiences and bad experiences. And I don't think if someone said, if you could do it, always say, if you could do something all over, what would you do? And I think I would let it stay the way it was because that was my path. And I don't think I would have been or become the person that I am as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister, if I didn't go through those challenges.
That's deep. Because a lot of people would say different. They'd say, man, I wish
I could have done this differently.
Yeah. And for you to say that, and I know that it's a life that you've reflected on.
It wasn't always happy. I mean, and the biggest journey was Benjamin.
Yeah.
I mean, that was not how it was supposed to happen. You're supposed to have a baby, be happy, go home, baby's healthy.
No issues.
No emotion. That's, but that is not what happened. And so, and I had to keep going because I couldn't give up because I had another life I had to take control over or guide, not control. But, so, I think I just look at things differently, and I refuse to be the victim of my own bad challenges. Yeah. And people can stay there and never get out. And I think when you're stuck, then the only person you hurt is yourself. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I won't say that I didn't do it all by myself because I had had good friends, and even the bad friends. Because sometimes the bad friends will help you out of that because, they may say something and you're like, oh, that really pissed me off. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to show you.
I know that story.
So, so having a bad friend isn't really bad because they push you in the direction maybe that you need to go.
Yeah, for sure.
So this leads me into another question. And I seen the many parts in your story in which you had to confront either individuals and situations. What lessons come again? Because it's just something else that a lot of us do in certain points in our lives. We want to avoid dealing with situations or confronting others that have hurt us or have the potential to hurt us. And you've been consistent in standing up for yourself. What lessons can you share with us regarding that?
I think your best advocate is yourself. I mean, we can depend on other people to advocate for us, I think, but you're in charge of your journey. You're in charge of your decisions, your choices. Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, maybe something happens and maybe there's a little bit of a challenge and maybe you're not. Maybe somebody forces a choice on you because I mean that happens. But for me, I mean, I think I look at the whole picture, and I think for me there was always someone in the picture that I had to take care of. So it was not always just about me. but it was always about me and the other person.
Yeah.
And whether it was my father and my mother or my son, you know, whether now it's the kids in the Explorer program or, you know, Benjamin and his friends, it's always, it's not about you. It's not just about you.
Yeah.
Because if you make yourself better, you can give so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and you don't have to be, you know, it's not like, I mean, we have doctorates, you're going for your that doesn't mean we're the brightest person in the room. Because sometimes I'll tell you, things go above my head. I'm like, okay, I didn't get the degree in that.
Yeah.
And
I don't, that's not what getting a, that's not what earning a doctorate isn't about being smart. It's about that persistence, you know, and that discipline.
They're looking for that status.
They are.
That status.
No, I get it. Yeah.
But I mean, so, you know, I think we all have our own journeys, and and the way you approach it is how you choose. Is how you know that's your life.
Yeah. There's something that you mentioned again consistently. It's that aspect of self-responsibility, but also giving back and caring for others. You know, you just mentioned about caring for your mother, caring for your father, caring for Ben, and everything else. Can you talk about how does it make you feel when you're giving back to others? Because I used to give the examples when I did training with young people that I'm the most selfish person that you will ever meet, because there's something that makes me feel good when somebody improves because I helped them out or something of that nature, of that nature, and that aspect of giving back. It's key to also our well-being. Can you tell us something about those two things, taking responsibility and caring for others, or loving our neighbors, as the Bible will say?
Okay, so I think in life somebody has always done something for us. So there's, you know, my mentors have been maybe the person I worked for, maybe it's, you know, that student that gave me some insight that I didn't know. So, you know, I think people give you something, and you give to others without the expectation of some kind of payment, or without the exception. If I give you this, Omar, I expect a favor next year, you know. I think you just, like, you know, when you ask me to do this, the expectation is not that, okay, now you're going to owe me something. Just
it's like, you're going to be like the Godfather calling in the favor, you know, a couple of years from now.
You know, this is something that you guys, this is your journey, and you've asked a couple of us to come and speak for you. And so it was like, okay, you know, this is what we do for each other, right?
Yeah.
There's no, you're not paying me. I'm not expecting payment. Well, you're giving me a sandwich.
And a t-shirt. And a t-shirt.
Wink, wink. We're not paying her.
And a t-shirt. And you get a t-shirt too. You get a t-shirt. And it's personalized too. But you'll get a t-shirt.
Because I think if your purpose is to do something for someone and with the expectation of you getting something back, then it's all for the wrong reason.
Correct.
And you're not doing it because it's genuine.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's how you know, like, that someone is truly, truly invested in a cause, or helping a person, or mentoring a person, and you do it at the best that you can.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, to me, that's, I mean, we all have to give and take. I mean, we're, you know, the new generation is coming up, and we're phasing out.
Yes.
And, you know, at some point, maybe one day they're going to say, oh, you know, Miss Brenda, she helped me out with this. And you know, and that's the payback. That,
yes.
You know, and it's ironic because, you know, I do take stock in children. And so I had this kid for 4 years, and he came by the office yesterday.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh my God. And he's in college.
By a surprise?
Now. Yeah, he came to visit me, and you know,
that's awesome.
And now he says, you know, Miss Brenda, when you're ready, I'm gonna take you out to dinner. So I was like, oh, you don't have to. I said, you don't have to. He says, no, you know, I have to.
No.
So I thought, well, you know, but that's it. When someone, you know, like, I didn't have to do it, any of that. And he didn't have to, you know, we were done. He was going to college. I did my part. I mentored him, and he still came back to say, you know, hey, how you doing? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, and that, you know, you can't put a dollar price on that.
No, not at all.
No.
There's a couple of things that I want to kind of ask you now as we come to the end. The first one is, after your 6+ decades on Earth.
6+. See, he put it out there. Not
Did I
me.
say plus?
You did.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just said plus.
She said 6
I'm
plus.
not even at the midway part. He's already plugged
Okay.
in.
All right, 5 plus. I don't know.
Oh, my
See,
God.
you got me in this trap.
I got you in this trap.
You said the decade
You
thing.
did
and now
this to
you got me all
yourself.
going.
Take responsibility.
All right, I'm taking responsibility. All right.
See,
So-
Brenda, I'm on your
I
side.
know.
So, a couple of kind of like wrap up questions that I have is for you. Is first, what are your thoughts on the origin and the meaning of life? You are a devout Catholic. You believe in that, and again, we share that in common as well. But what is your belief in the meaning of life and the purpose of it?
I know I've answered this question. Probably going to answer it different now.
Let me see. I'm going to test you. I'm just kidding.
Well, I think we all have a different meaning of our lives because we each take a different journey.
Okay.
So, I mean, all I want for mine is to have, I guess, made some kind of a difference and live my life peacefully.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm happy. I am not complaining when I go home. Oh, maybe to bed.
Clean your room.
There's, you know, the mother thing, that's a full-time job, never ends.
It never
Sure
ends.
doesn't.
Yeah, being a
Yeah.
parent never ends.
But I think, you know, the meaning of life is kind of, it's your life. And so my meaning is going to be different than yours and different than yours. And what has gotten me to this part of the journey is my life.
Yeah.
So the meaning is the good, the bad, the ugly, and then what I decided to do with
And
it.
what you decide to do.
And then wherever I end up, you know, my faith tells me there's someplace else that I'll go. But for right now, I'm living.
Yeah.
And when I leave, I will have left something behind.
Yeah,
Okay. Good.
definitely.
Good. You have experienced death. Your parents, really close with Ben. What are your thoughts on death and what happens after we die? You mentioned that just a little bit.
I think we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I mean, I don't think you're ever prepared for it either. Even when you have a sick parent and you know that, okay, the end is coming, but you're never really prepared for it. Because there's always that little hope you know, hang on to. But there's also that part that you know you have to let go.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you say to yourself, it's okay to let go. Because they have lived their life and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And I think for me to keep, you know, myself, you know, peace in mind is that when I do let them go, they're going to someplace happy where they're whole again and they're not in the pain they were. If they were in pain, that they're not in that pain anymore. And I think that's more to comfort us.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that says, you know, you can't,
Yeah.
you don't want to be like, oh my goodness, they passed and they were so miserable and they're still miserable.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is how we deal with death.
It's funny because we say that, like if somebody, a friend of ours or if somebody dies or a relative or somebody of theirs dies, to console that individual, we'll always say things like, well, you just think they're in a better place now. So that's funny you said that, because it's to console ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and I think, you know, we're all going to get there.
Oh, so what about that? What about facing your own mortality? What do you ever think about that? Is that something that crosses your mind? And if it does, like, what is it that you think about? And you mentioned it somewhere in here too.
Well, I hope I go to that happy place.
Okay.
I mean, and that's the faith part. That's the faith part.
Yeah.
That when you die, you go somewhere. You know that your life is over, but your soul is somewhere else, or you know, something like that. But I mean, sometimes when you think about death and how you're gonna die, I mean, I think one of my fears is I would hate to like die tragically. And if I do, I hope it's like quick. I'm a chicken. I mean, I don't do well with pain. So I mean, I would like. I'm just saying.
Brenda, meet Omar.
Yeah.
I'm the same.
I'm just
I don't like pain. Pain and me don't go together.
No, I mean, you know, so I'm hoping that, you know, if you led a good life, and even if you led a bad life, that at the end, everything is peace.
No.
And I hope that there's like a big party upstairs. You know, you hope that you know, like that, you know, you always say that you'll get to see everybody.
Yeah.
I almost kind of think about like, am I going to see them like when they were in their 20s?
Yeah.
Or am I
Are we going to see them in their prime? Or are they going to, am I going to recognize them? Because they're going to, you know, yeah, good point. That's a very good point.
Funny.
You know, so I hope they don't shut the gates.
Like, here comes Brenda, shut the door.
I mean, that's why I keep doing some good deeds, because I'm figuring I got to get those brownie points.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say those points. Yeah.
Now there's a lot of dancing up there from what I hear. So there you go. You
There's
know,
gonna
you could
be
just
a
you can show off
party.
and stuff. You
There
can
you
show
go.
up.
Do the,
I'll be light
you can
as
do the
a
hustle
feather.
up
Light as,
there.
there you go. Light
That's
as a
right.
feather.
That's right. That's right.
So now that we come to this end, right? And you again, you live the cycle. You understand. You are aware of all the things that happen. You are appreciative of the things that happen, both the good and the bad. What's left for you? What are your plans? What are your aspirations? What are you working on right now?
I mean, I guess to succeed in what I'm doing right now in terms of a career path, I want to see Ben grow more. I want to see him have a family and the values that he will put into that family, and have some grandchildren that I can spoil. But I also want to, I want to stay young too. I want to be like my dad, that was like in his 90s, but he was really in his 70s or 60s.
70s, yeah.
I don't want to be that lady that, Ben shoves in a nursing home and forgets. Because I'll tell him, I said, you put me in a nursing home, you're going to get some phone calls that your mother's
Every day
on her golf cart. Listen. I will live my life until my last breath.